Hey everyone, welcome back to FPL Fran. Today's video is going to be my Game Week 7 transfer plans. We're looking at a really good game week, a really fortunate game week. I'm honestly so happy because, yeah, sometimes like FPL just feels rough, and for a while it's felt that way, and clearly since Wildcard 4, I've been extremely lucky, and that's just nice to do and nice to have. We're on 85 points this week. We have Gabriel completely saving the game week. I wouldn't even say saving the game week. He just kind of made it better. And we have one player to go, which I think compared to the rest of the field, there's a lot of Tarkowski and Jais. There's a lot of Everton players, but I mean, that looks positive, generally speaking. So should be a great game week. We triple captained Haaland. I think that was very fortunate in the sense that, you know, I mean, ultimately he scored his goals late in the game, and we didn't have, for example, an early substitution that sort of prevented him from being able to get those chances and those goals, you know, considering the sort of injury context and him needing a little bit of rest, right? So really positive there. I did actually make a decision close towards the deadline to start playing DEFCON players. And this is, I think, a bit of an adaptation in terms of how the game is. Like, I've benched Mateta and I've benched Paquet. I kind of regret benching Mateta because, honestly, watching Crystal Palace, they just looked exquisite. In fact, I think that was probably their best attacking performance this season, if you exclude the Community Shield game. I've even watched some of their European playoff games. I don't know why. Don't ask me, but yeah, that was a positive thing too. Mateta just looks like a really good hold now. So when I kind of look at my team and just review, anyways, like, I'm very happy with double Arsenal defense. Virgil's a bit of a question mark because I think that this Liverpool team just isn't looking particularly good on defense. Anderson, I think season-long hold. Senesi, season-long hold. Gabriel, for now, a hold. Raya, hold. Lacroix, also a hold. You know, I didn't go for Guehi. I didn't keep him for the price rises. He's just consistently getting assists and assists and assists. And I was making a joke with someone on the X timeline about how he's just been on fire since he's been involved in a transfer saga. But I think the nice and positive thing with Lacroix is we've seen that he's still been able to get more defensive contributions in terms of the hit rate compared to some of his peers. His last season numbers were also better. So even though Chris Richards is also doing the DEFCONs lately, I think the positive is we know that there's probably more game situations where Lacroix can hit DEFCONs, and I'm looking forward to that, especially even just going to next week where, you know, I feel super comfortable playing Lacroix almost every single week. As far as the midfield, I think Dewsbury Hall has a small question mark. With Reinders, we saw an 84-minute substitution versus Burnley, but I think that's just Pep managing minutes of certain players, right? Yeah, Bernardo Silva is around and he can take some of those minutes. Savio is on the and Bob can take those right wing minutes from Silva, which sort of allows him to take Reinders' minutes, which is what happened in the Burnley match. But I think that actually happens less so within future matches. So I tend to think games like Burnley, where you know you're almost dealing with a parked bus the entire match, I think Pep is more willing to play with, I guess, more of an offensive sort of one-on-one type winger compared to, let's say, Bernardo, who's a little bit more of a control type of player that allows for City to have a bit more, I think, of a measured approach within a game compared to, let's say, what Bob would do or what Savio would do. So I think Reinders' minutes are fine. I still look forward to games like Brentford away. I think even for people who, let's say, moved into Foden this week, you should be looking forward to games like Brentford away. Like, these are still really good games that City actually have. I wouldn't be worried about Reinders for the time being. And I'm happy to have bought back into another 2 price rises. But, you know, what I probably need to do is just hold on to him and then let him get his holes as they come. When I think about the games in the future, sure, a lot of them are red or gray on the radar, but they're still quite nice. I think even Aston Villa away is quite a nice game. Bournemouth at home is still on paper a nice game. Reinders is someone that I would like to hold for the long term now, but I'm happy to manage the situation in terms of knowing that he could be a future transfer. As, of course, City have a little bit more depth coming back into the team. We know Kovacic is close based on Pep's mentions. Rodri is out, however, although I think that almost bolsters Nico's minutes and less so Reinders, even though I've seen him play in the holding role within the Club World Cup. I think Semenyo is just an easy hold. Bruno is an easy hold. I'm not even going to discuss that, in the sense that I might be stubborn, and that's okay. Like, some people might not want to own Bruno in their team. That's totally fine. But I think Bruno is just still a wonderful pick in the game. He's still getting defense contributions, although this time around he only got 11, not 12. Is he capable of missing penalties? Apparently he's gone one for 2 this season, which is obviously against his career record, a bit of an aberration. Is it possible that he could lose penalties and therefore he would lose value entirely? Yes, but I still think he's on penalties. And until the moment that I think he's not on penalties, I'm probably going to be happy keeping someone like Bruno in my team because of the mixed ways that he can actually get us points in FPL. With Dewsbury Hall, the biggest thing with him is he's got 4 yellow cards. I almost hope that he gets the yellow card in the Palace game, which means that he gets suspended for City. I doubt that that's going to be something that is nailed on to happen. But we can just reassess with this West Ham game. I think the pro with Dewsbury Hall always is going to be that this is a 90-minute player. There are some other interesting 5 million players, but I don't think anyone who's much better than him outright. I also think that there's a lot of upgrades that I could potentially make at the 5.9 million tier or even at the 6.5 million tier in the midfield, which kind of goes back to the question of in the future, maybe the way that I actually get more funds into the midfield is actually selling Virgil van Dijk. That's a possibility, but that's not something that I've basically considered as a locked-in option. I also have a lot of money spent in the forwards. I've got 0.7 in the bank now after the 2 moves that I made for Haaland and Reinders. I sold Thiago. I haven't even reacted to that, but I think in terms of the long-term decision-making on Thiago, I was not sure about his minutes versus Man United because Keith Andrews was playing this new sort of back 3 structure, front 2, and Thiago was getting much reduced minutes compared to the first 3 games in the season. So when I did a wildcard 4, I clearly went into a Thiago thinking that they would stay within that structure, play and have him be close to a 90-minute player who's also on penalties because Sade missed the penalty in Game Week 3. Now, as it turns out, he played 90 minutes versus United because they moved back into this front 3, which allowed for Dango to start the game as well. And then Dango actually became the sub, most likely because Thiago himself was having a really good match, and they didn't really have any depth as well. Fabio Carvalho was not a part of that Brentford squad that squashed Man United. So yeah, do I regret it in terms of, okay, I could have played Thiago to get some FPL points? Sure, I do. But I think the decision in terms of moving Thiago was still logical, where I still have good Gyökeres fixtures to go with Arsenal. I still have good reasons to own Mateta because I still think that Crystal Palace is a really good team. Now, should I have played Mateta versus Liverpool? In hindsight, absolutely. He had so many good chances himself. Like, I think, if anything, he could have also had a brace compared to, let's say, Igor Thiago with the quality of chances that both of them had within their respective matches. And that's what happens in FPL when you sort of make transfers between already good picks. You're going to deal with outcomes that are not great. And you're also almost making decisions without perfect information. Like, I don't really know what Keith Andrews is doing, but clearly he was doing something right versus United, so fair play to him. We own Mateta, though, which I think the competing pick within this team versus, let's say, a conventional wildcard 6 template is Mateta versus João Pedro. Now, João Pedro has much better games on 9 and 11, but I actually think that if I hold Mateta, I'm actually okay with just managing through the fixtures in the future. And then the only question mark in my team would be, how do I get towards someone like Palmer? Now, something I wanted to also think about is just the question of Gyökeres and whether Saka is actually on penalties. Saka had his hands on the ball, but there was a lot of sort of mentions about how, Trossard was intonating towards giving the ball to Gyökeres. That hasn't happened yet. I think Gyökeres is on penalties, but another pro is that Saka's minutes are still being managed, as we can see within the Newcastle game. So you have that almost Semenyo benefit, I guess, of getting, whatever the excess is of Kluivert's, non-field minutes. In the same case with Saka for now. So Gyökeres feels like a nice hold. Paqueta's another question mark in the team. If I kind of look at, how I would roll out my team this week, I mean, I'm going to play Raya and Gabriel. I'm thinking about playing Virgil now, but I'm considering maybe making a transfer, maybe just keeping it as it is, getting defensive contributions, knowing that this Chelsea team have a lot of suspensions, have a lot of injuries that really should impact the way that they play. But, looking back, Liverpool with another away match were absolutely awful. I mean, they conceded upwards of 3xG versus Crystal Palace, and Crystal Palace are not actually a team, I would say, that are almost offensively tilted. Like, they, I think, have a very strong, resolute structure. They don't try to overplay teams. They don't try to outplay teams too much. They go for a lot of draws sometimes where it's needed, like within the Chelsea game in Game Week 1, and they don't, for example, overcommit, I would say. Whereas actually within the Liverpool game, I think because of the game state, there was a bit of Liverpool actually getting a lot of great attacks off, but then Crystal Palace almost matching blow for blow. And I don't think that's going to happen too often with Palace, but it just shows you that the strength that they have to almost go toe-to-toe as an attack versus Liverpool. Whereas in this case, I'm hoping, of course, Chelsea still look a little bit stagnant because we know that Palmer's still out, and there's an opportunity for Virgil to get defensive contributions anyways, which is a bit of a plus. The rest of the team, I think, plays itself. Semenyo, Reinders, Bruno, Mateta, Haaland, Gyökeres. There's a question, I suppose, of playing Anderson as well, because I almost have, let's say, Semenyo the attacker versus Anderson. I'm almost expecting both clean sheets to be busted in terms of, let's say, Anderson and Virgil. So at this point, I'm almost looking towards defensive contributions or reducing the goal tally against. And I kind of feel like Virgil could still do that for me over, let's say, Anderson. Paqueta clearly can't be a play, but there's an angle to transfer him out. There's also an angle to just keeping Paqueta in my team because, okay, I don't like Arsenal away, but if I can keep Paqueta, I've got Brentford at home still, I've got Leeds away still, and then I can probably reassess on a game week like Game Week 9 or maybe Game Week 10 if I have to do that, right? So that's something I've been thinking about. Otherwise, I think in terms of actually reviewing the fixtures this week, I mean, what do I actually feel about the matches, and what are my reflections? United, like, I don't know when this Amarim experiment's going to end. Hopefully soon. Does that really change my mind on Bruno? No, because I still think he's been mostly impervious to how horrible they've been as a whole. But yeah, I mean, that's a positive game for Brentford, and I think it's nice to see them move back into a back three that already immediately makes Thiago a good pick again, which really annoys me. But at the same time, I almost look at my team and I think maybe I still would have kept Mateta and Gyökeres. Maybe I would have sold Mateta. And something to monitor with Mateta as well is they've got European fixtures now. So in the midweek game, you know, is Mateta going to start within that match, or is Nketiah going to start within that match? And who's going to get more managed minutes going forwards? Because right now, the Mateta minutes look exquisite within the league. But a lot of that, I think it could be spurred on by game state and him needing to stay on. It might be the case that Mateta's minutes could actually be reduced later down the line this season. And then maybe I don't actually want to own him so much. With Chelsea and Brighton, I think the red card changed the game. I mean, it's the same thing as last week, really, where I think they kind of shot themselves in the foot. I don't think Chelsea are this bad, but then Liverpool's next, so that's a pretty tough game. After that, though, you know, if you own João Pedro, like this, there's no need to really worry about João Pedro. I think he's still a very solid pick. Is he owned by most of the game? Yes. And am I the type of manager who doesn't mind going against it? That's certainly me. So I'm happy to not own João Pedro for now, but is he still a very scary pick to go against? Absolutely. I think he's still top. With Leeds and Bournemouth, I think Leeds were actually very impressive. I made a comment about how I thought Leeds were really unimpressive last week versus Wolves, but if anything, they were playing at home here versus Bournemouth, and I think created more than enough opportunities to actually deserve to win the game, whereas Bournemouth were probably quite fortunate to actually get a draw and salvage that. So I think very unfortunate for Leeds within that context. They actually seem like still a very strong team, and it goes back to that sort of when we're talking about these promoted teams, like how strong their defensive base is. Pretty impressive from Leeds as a defensive home performance. With City, the Haaland chances are just crazy. I think Doku's minutes are very interesting. We put him in the cheat sheet last week. I think he's going to be an interesting pick going forwards. Not much else to say with Burnley. With Forest and Sunderland, I think Forest should have easily scored within that match. Now, Sunderland have been super impressive, right? We put Alderete and we put Mukiel in the cheat sheet. Do I think the cleans are necessarily deserved? No, but you can see that they still are a very, very good team, and they've matched up very well almost against every team that they've played against. So when I actually look at next weekend and I'm thinking about my captaincy, I probably 3-4 weeks ago was thinking that I'd go for Bruno captaincy for sure, but I almost want to just keep it on Haaland now. It's safe. It kind of goes against my own conventional wisdom of wanting to sort of pick the sort of risk-seeking, let's say, captaincy, but I almost think it's, I wouldn't say a fool's errand, but it, like, Haaland is right there, really. And he's still averaging like 1.34 XG per 90. Just a freak. Going back to Sunderland, though, I would say Forest actually looked okay. But the story with Andrews, I suppose, is whether he's going to get results with his team. I don't think he's not going to get the sack anytime soon, right? So it's a case of just what has happened to Forest recently. If anything, I think that you can see that they're going to be a little bit more defensively frail, but they're also still playing Morata right now, which is a huge downgrade compared to Murillo. So I don't think there's too much that can really be said so far. But if you own Forest picks, I think that's kind of the end. The fixture run gets worse. You're now starting to see Igor Jesus and Woods minutes mix. You're also starting to see, I think, change in style, which probably impacts defensive contributions compared to a Nuno structure. And you know what's funny is we now actually look ahead towards, let's say, the last match in the week, which is going to be Everton versus West Ham, which I'll be eagerly watching, and just seeing how long it will take for maybe, let's say, Nuno to transform this West Ham side, because maybe that they could actually become a great DEFCON side. Like someone like Kilman, who I think is at 4.4 million, could become quite interesting very, very quickly. So that's something I'm kind of, looking forward to. Whereas Everton, I think the case for them is just how good their offense is, how much they can sort of prove it time and time again this season with the sort of new look signings with Grealish, with Dewsbury Hall. And I made this kind of argument on X once again on the weekend or last weekend, but I basically said that I think Njai is a better pick than Grealish. Sure, the entire offense flows through Grealish, but that doesn't necessarily mean that more FPL points will land towards Grealish. I think you still have someone like Njai who still has really good defensive contribution baselines. He still takes penalties. And at the end of the day, with better creative threats and more outlets in the team, he's allowed to be a little bit more of an attacking pick, right? Instead of someone who was actually taking the ball in the halfway line in the field, like under Shondaish, like he's now allowed to play off ball a little bit more and play a lot more advanced. So I think, look, the takeaway is just going to be how good is the Everton team is going to be. I think West Ham is going to be a nice little test for them at home. With Newcastle versus Arsenal, I think that was a very odd game because I would say Arsenal probably defended most situations well. I don't really know why Saliba didn't start, but maybe it was performance related. Maybe it's also just in terms of injury management related as well. But Mosquera conceded the corner. Gabriel almost, I don't know, wilted like a feather versus Voltemata. It was a very deserved goal for Newcastle. But I think in most situations, I would almost expect Gabriel to win that header that Voltemata scored with. And that's another Arsenal clean sheet. In the end, though, I got, extremely lucky. Gabriel got defensive contributions as well and got triple bonus. So, can I really complain whatsoever? Absolutely not. I feel really happy about also going Gabriel 2 weeks ago on the wildcard because it wasn't a super popular window to go for Gabriel on the wildcard. And it almost feels like when I look at my wildcard 6 team, my wildcard 4 team in hindsight compared to the wildcard 6s, what is the difference? Probably no Foden, no Saka, but everyone has double Arsenal defense from what I can see. They got Gyökeres and I've got Mateta versus João Pedro. I don't think I'm too far behind the field. Maybe the one pick that I don't, or maybe the one pick that I own that a lot of people don't own is Paqueta. And he could very well be a transfer for me this week, so we can talk about that in a moment. But then I guess there's also a small question mark on Dewsbury Hall, but at the same time, I also see Stack on a lot of drafts. I don't think I'm too far off, and if anything, a lot of the advantage towards wildcard 6 was the Richarlison match versus Wolves at home, the Foden match versus Burnley at home, and that's gone now. So I almost feel like I've normalized versus wildcard 6. I've been very lucky to do probably better as well, just because of triple captaincy with Haaland and how hard it'll be to sort of match that sort of level of Hall. But, you just have to say we got lucky and we just move on and just be really happy about that. The last game I wanted to talk about was Aston Villa versus Fulham. I actually watched that game. I think Fulham sort of crumpled within a few minutes. There was also a weird sort of Rodgers handball, although I guess sometimes they don't really get called now by VAR and they don't get disallowed like they used to. But Watkins looked great in that match. I still think Rodgers is a very poor FPL asset because just the underlying numbers aren't there, but Watkins very much is. He's still a key part of that attack. And there's not much else to be said, right? That was a good Watkins game. And ironically, I think, everyone has confidence to just keep him versus Burnley at home. But after that, there's still the question mark about reassessing with Watkins. Interestingly, if he has perfect minutes and you've already taken the price drops, I don't see Watkins as an awful hold, but their fixtures do really, they're horrendous, right? There's no denying it. I think 8, 9, and 10 are particularly bad for Aston Villa, but if you have larger problems in the team, I suppose, and you don't want a wild card, I can kind of see the value or the utility of maybe holding a Watkins simply because at least he's playing football and you at least know he's capable of scoring a goal, as he has been many, many times in many, many seasons. So that's the only takeaway from that game. I think Fulham really were unfortunate with the Raul injury, and especially since Muniz wasn't even a part of the matchday squad. They had complete control in the first half of the match up until the Raul injury, which honestly was quite early anyways, as well as his goal. But if that's all that takes to sort of wilt the Fulham team, then I think that's a problem, right? So maybe a team to target, especially on the weekend. And that kind of makes me not want to play Anderson as well, even though he's, a DEFCON monster. So that's the takeaway for my team. Let's just quickly move into my transfer plans. All right, so we switched gears here towards the Fantasy Football Hub, my team pick and rating tool. You can actually access it yourself using the link in the description below. All you need is a pro tier subscription, and you can get access to this, which will sort of act as a planner and also suggest you with moves down the line if you're almost in doubt of what to do with your team. I'm just going to quickly reset my team here because obviously I've made the moves. So I'll just import my team, search my ID, which is 190, and here we are. So from a Gameweek 7 perspective, I think if I optimize my team, it clearly says or clearly recommends for me to play Mateta. Fair enough. I think I was considering to do that anyways, but it does recommend playing Dewsbury Hall over Virgil and Anderson. Now let's just see whether or not Dewsbury Hall gets suspended anyways. But otherwise, the bench order is very much similar. I think the biggest question mark is going to be how good do I think Crystal Palace are going to be, right? Because if I think Crystal Palace are really, really good, really, really good at the back as well, do I really want to play Dewsbury Hall? Maybe not, especially if I think there could be a nice Virgil outcome anyways. But one of the transfers that I have thought about is just simply actually bidding off Paqueta. Now, this is very aggressive. You know me, I don't really particularly like rolling because I guess the logic that I tend to have is that I think my team's very, very solid. If I have a really deep bench, I don't really mind throwing transfers in the wind, knowing that it could benefit me with some shortfalls where I get transfer gains, I guess, expected points gains as well. So, who would that player be for Paqueta? For me, it would easily be Minte. I think Minte just immediately improves the team. And I think he's entering a bit of a freaky level where this is a very young player who doesn't have a great history of underlying stats. But when you look at kind of some of the numbers around him as a player in terms of, his kind of profile as a player, I think someone that we definitely expect to improve. And And so far this season within the Premier League, he's almost already improved his expected goal numbers and his expected assisted goal numbers. Now, this is a small sample size, but with 6 games and close to perfect minutes, he's played 84 minutes per match. Minty is someone who's actually on 0.29 XG per 90 and 0.33 expected assisted goals per 90. So to me, he's one of the top players in the game and potentially actually my favorite midfielder. The alternative, I guess, is just going for Ismaila Sarr as well, right? We haven't forgotten about him. One of my favorite players in FPL. But I think the tricky thing with going for Ismaila Sarr is just about how he's going to be a future AFCON transfer. And maybe I want to have money in the bank to make sure that I can make some other moves within my team, right? So the more money I shell into the midfield, I guess the more inflexible I become potentially to like maybe making future moves. So this is a very aggressive one free transfer move. And I think it can carry me to game week 8. I could also, as I said, just play Sarr, who clearly just is one of the top model picks. No surprise because his underlying stats are incredible. And he's literally come back to his first Premier League start post hamstring injury and, dropped the goal in Liverpool. He himself is running on sort of nuclear hot numbers, but that's no surprise. Sarr was one of the best sort of underlying players last season, I think within midfielders, maybe top 2 and maybe just behind Palmer and Salah. So top 3 rather. In game week 8 though, team looks very, very good again. This is a Virgil game week, of course. Minte actually still looks quite good versus Newcastle at home just because it's a home game. Mateta looks nice as well. I think around game week 8 is probably where we can get a little bit more of an understanding of whether Gyökeres is a good long-term hold or not. So far, it looks good, right? We're playing 90 minutes of football. He's at least in and around chances. He's getting shots off for the most part. Has he scored goals? Not necessarily, but I still think that he's almost on paper still better than a lot of the other forward picks in the game, and he actually has a good fixture run for him. Then on game week 9, I think that's the big looming question around, do I try to maximize around going for Chelsea, right? One of the positives as well in terms of the team rating on the top left corner is that this is the highest it's ever been for me, so I feel quite good in terms of the team that I moved into on the wild card for now still seems to be very much well rated by the model. So that's a plus. But I think when I just think about my team going forwards, game week 9 is that sort of week where with Mateta having another bad fixture, this is an interesting opportunity to consider whether I want to sell Mateta or Gyökeres, right? Because I could do something like maybe keep Mateta within the team. I could also just consider also maybe taking Dewsbury Hall out of the team. And because I've done the Minte move in game week 7, I only have 2 free transfers here. So what are the kind of options that I have right now? I think I've got Gyök to maybe Gu, and then maybe let's say Palmer can come into the team, which means I'd be playing Mateta versus Arsenal away. Not ideal, to be honest, but something that I could very much do. An alternative, I guess, is I go out of Mateta instead, and I don't shop for Palmer. I instead just shop for João Pedro because I've got money in the bank to go for João Pedro. I can't imagine that João Pedro's got too many more price rises. I can't see myself really being priced out of João Pedro. So he can be that interesting transfer where if, let's say, Palmer doesn't seem like he's 100% fit and he's not shelling out the minutes that we want to, and maybe Gyökeres looks perfectly fine as a pick, there is still an angle towards simply just going for Mateta here. Mateta out to João Pedro, that is. But as you can see too, I mean, like Mateta actually is a really good pick after this game week. So something that I need to deliberate is, whether I want to actually go for João Pedro in the first place, because it's almost going from a differential pick that I have that I really, really like long-term still, into someone who's really popular that, sure, it gets me a lot of advantages within game week 9 in terms of making the team better. Like if I bring in João Pedro here, no surprise that the game week rating shoots up by 3%. But I also need to think about what the sort of long-term ramifications are in terms of, is João Pedro that much better than, let's say, Mateta from a game week 9 perspective and going onwards? Because, even Tottenham away is arguably quite a tough game, but there are really nice games that João Pedro has, like game week 11, like game week 12, right? So that's something that I really need to consider. I don't think it's necessary to make that move. But as I said as well, if I don't go for this João Pedro move on game week 9, I can easily just do Gyökeres out to Palmer if I really think that Palmer is essential and I need to go for him. But, I don't think we need to necessarily make plans for Palmer now. What's an alternative path that I can do? I think I can just try to be a bit more flexible, roll a free transfer for once, FPL Fran, because, you're so allergic to them. And then just carry my team towards game week 9. And then ask the same sort of questions in game week 9 here. I mean, it's still a 94% rated team. Paqueta's not too far away from Minte if I can ignore game week 7 and 8. And he himself has a really good fixture that I still want to give him, which I guess would be game week 11 versus Burnley at home. So that's something to think about. If I have 3 transfers on this game week, this gives me a lot more flexibility to move out of Gyökeres, Mateta, and maybe another midfielder. So that could be even, let's say, going out of Dewsbury Hall. That could also be going out of Virgil van Dijk too, because I guess we probably have a little bit more information about how bad this Liverpool defense really is going to be. They've probably put in their worst defensive performance thus far yet. So I don't want to overreact on that one game, but the other games preceding that weren't much better. So what if I do something like Virgil van Dijk into Diakite? Because I guess one of the pros of... All right, maybe let's try spell Diakite correctly. But I mean, I guess one of the pros of moving to Diakite is I get another DEFCON monster that plays for Bournemouth. But then the con clearly is going to be Game Week 10 and 11 are really bad fixtures for Bournemouth. And I think that puts my team in a very, very tight position. So it could be someone else. I don't know if it's going to be Richards necessarily, but it could be. I guess it could be Richards. And I could maybe ship out of, let's say, Dewsbury Hall. I could also maybe ship out maybe Mateta, if that's what I want to do. So I could go into Palmer. Let's just pretend Palmer's fine. And then I can also go into Gu. And Richards, I believe, is 4.6 million. So this tracks. Like, this shouldn't be a 0.1 million move. And if anything, it should be a 0.0 million move. But this also could be an interesting sort of path where, you know, suddenly I now have my team set up to owning a lot of Palace, who we feel comfortable with, generally speaking. Is it nice to have Palace versus Arsenal away? Not really. So the defense does look worse. I'm almost shipping out Virgil on a good game week for him on paper because it's Brentford away, and then moving into a much worse defense. But this could maybe, you know, improve the structure of my team if I really wanted Palmer and felt like he was an essential option to have on this game week. But I think the pro is either I make that move in Game Week 7 and I'm a little bit less flexible to making moves, or I trust my team and actually make that Minte transfer. And another question, I think, even just going back to, let's say, Game Week 6, right, is I don't know what exactly is going to happen with Paqueta under Nuno. It could be the case that Paqueta is still nailed and we actually think, okay, this West Ham team is actually better anyways. I own Paqueta, who's a penalty taker for this team, and he's still playing 90 minutes a game. That's a huge pro. Or he's starting to get subbed off at 75, 80 minutes like Gibbs White kind of used to do for Nottingham Forest. And suddenly that removes the chances and potential for Paqueta to get defensive contributions. Maybe that removes the potential for him to also, you know, even get more penalty share over a full match. So that's a bit of a con, I think. And that could drive me towards the free transfer. But that's just something I need to monitor within my team, because I think the rest of the team, for the most part now, still looks solid. Like even Virgil, worst case scenario with him is that he still does the defensive contributions. Like if you look at a City game, for example, and they lose the clean sheet versus Burnley, is it that likely that Guardiola's going to get defensive contributions unless they play Arsenal? I don't think so. Whereas with Virgil, I think it is quite likely still for him to get defensive contributions, even if they drop a stinker. So that's kind of a pro, I think, to owning Virgil, and maybe I shouldn't overreact on him. So as I said, let's monitor exactly what's going to happen towards the team in Game Week 9. And then from Game Week 10 onwards, I think, you know, owning Chelsea again is going to be generally still a pro. And I can still make this sort of Paqueta to Minte move a little bit later down the line as well, if I wanted to ignore that move, you know, or maybe I just wait for Burnley at home, give Paqueta that game, and then reassess after Game Week 11, because Bournemouth away then starts a pretty bad run of games for West Ham regardless, and I don't think Nuno is going to salvage that necessarily. So something to think about right now in terms of my transfer plans. The free hit is something that a lot of people will be asking questions over. I think free hit 11 is quite interesting, which is also part of the reasons why I need to consider whether I want to keep Paqueta in my team. Because why is free hit 11 interesting? I think if I kind of optimize my team here, actually the game week rating is very, very high, but it is basically going to be owning these City players versus Liverpool. Maybe I don't want Haaland necessarily on this week. It could be a bit of a pro to maybe even, let's say, target potentially someone like a Bukayo Saka on a free hit here. I don't exactly know whether I'm going to commit to it, right? Because I think if I sell Paqueta, then maybe that kind of enhances the reason for doing it. It could also reduce the need to actually move into Palmer, because I would actually not care about the Wolves at home game. And there's a lot of things I need to decide before getting towards Game Week 11. But that's one of the fixtures that I think does stick out to me, where I'm not sure if that's exactly a great game for like owning this sort of Haaland template type structure team. But you know, there doesn't seem like there's going to be a huge possibility of a double game week now that Crystal Palace have actually matched against Liverpool at Anfield within... Now, I know that Crystal Palace just beat Liverpool at home at Sellers Park, but I think the big difference is going to be, okay, you're playing at Anfield. Are the chances of Crystal Palace advancing high? And therefore, are the chances of a blank game week and double game week happening high either? And of course, we have a little bit more information by the time we get towards this point. I don't think I need to change my team radically to fit the 5th free at 11 structure. It's just a plus. But something I'm thinking about right now is if I really like my team, I almost don't even know which fixture to specifically play the free hit on. Like free hit 6 looked good on paper until I was really convinced that I'm just going to go Haaland for the future. And now I'm almost thinking, I don't even know when I'm going to play it. It could actually be the case that I just end up playing it on Game Week 14, right? Because that's Fulham away. That's going to be a tough match no matter what for Holland, although is there really a tough match for Holland right now? So something to think about, right? With 3 at 11 or 3 at 14 rather, this is a really good Liverpool game week, and Salah, for example, will be a top option. So for example, if I search Salah, he is by far and away much higher in terms of expected points. Now, one of the narratives that I think we want to keep tracking going forwards is how much has Salah fallen off? How are the markets reacting to him? How are the models reacting to him? Because in a couple of weeks' time, I think you've got more than enough information to say, okay, this is looking like a bad Liverpool / Salah / whatever season. Do we almost hold Salah towards a different degree? Because I think a lot of people are already there. I still believe Salah's a very, very good pick, but there can definitely be questions asked, especially if holding Salah also forces a future free transfer, right? One of the pros of actually holding 5 or getting 5 free transfers on Game Week 16 due to AFCON is also just the idea that if you're on a Holland structure, you still save those free transfers anyways because you don't have any AFCON players within your team. And if anything, those 5 free transfers become extremely useful for you later down the line when there's going to be some early double game weeks. Like, when did we have double game weeks, last season? Probably, in the mid-20s, around that sort of area. So that could be actually where you use those 5 free transfers, because it's not like you need to actually use all 5 free transfers around Game Week 16. We've already used our bench boost, at least in the context of my own team. So that can be a huge benefit to being able to solve future fixture-related problems that will undoubtedly come about due to, so many Premier League teams being involved in so many cup competitions. So that's something I want to think about and sort of put, in the air, I guess. I'm roughly thinking that Game Week 14 as a free hit is the best, but we'll just see what happens. For now, I'm extremely happy with my team. I'm extremely fortunate to be in a really good position to sort of get a lot of these lucky rank rises, and we just got to keep moving on. So thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you guys have a wonderful game week as well. Enjoy the West Ham versus Everton game, because I know I will. And I'll see you guys soon.